I have clapped and we're ready to record. Hello and welcome. In today's video I made a blanket, but not just any blanket, no, a pixel art blanket, which, oh my gosh, is so much more harder than making a normal blanket. Why? Well, because you have to make each square a pixel in the pixel art that you are designing, if that makes any sense. Basically, each pixel in the pixel art has to be a square. And if you're doing a detailed pixel art blanket, that means you have to make teeny tiny little squares and a bunch of them, which it can be fun, but it can also be like, when is this gonna end? For this blanket, I wanted to use wool that I already had, so I wasn't buying more wool for this. I was just using the many wools that I already had. I basically set a rule of not buying any more wool for it. I basically had to have the wool that I needed. Even if I ran out of the wool, I had to use wool that I had, which was tricky with some of the colors because I only had limited amount of that wool, which was hard and difficult to get a similar color to the wool that I ran out of. So some of the pixels in the blanket are completely different colors, but it still turned out pretty cool because, I mean, you're like zooming out, you're not like looking at it really close and stuff. You're just looking at the overall picture instead of the one little pixel. I feel like there's a life lesson in that, but I'm gonna just fast forward through it. And then the background, I left that till very last to figure out because there's like so many colors in the smiley faces already. I was like, what color would the background be and where would I get that wool from? How would I have enough wool to do the background? But I used a whole bunch of random wool, which worked because it's all random colors all put together. This blanket took me forever to make, so let's get into how I made it. Next was actually crocheting the squares. I measured out like how big I wanted the blanket and did some maths, and I ended up with each square having to be 5 by 5. It took me maybe like 1.5 to 2 months to crochet all the squares. When I crocheted the colors, I'll crochet all the squares for that one color and then move on to the next color. So I did all the light colors. I think I did in rainbow order because that was really fun. So I did pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and then the darker pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and then the background colors. That's just how I did it. You can do it differently. My dog's just asleep. I just woke her up. To make it a bit easier to track how many squares I've done, I used an app on my iPad called a counter or something, but you can use like any counting app you want or website or whatever to keep track of all the squares you make, because trust me, you'll want to keep track of them and not have to count them each time you do them. And to make it even more easier on myself so I can absolutely keep track of them, I would crochet 5 squares and then I put them in the box, and then I'll crochet another 5 squares and I'll put them in the box. Just so like as I go, I can be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 5 squares. How many squares have I done? 34? That doesn't make sense. What's wrong? That was amazing. That was crocheting the squares. Not much to say about that because it's just doing the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. So many squares. Next up, sewing them together. To make it a lot more easier to sew all the squares together, I ended up sewing a 5 by 5 square of squares. It did make it so much more easier to then sew the whole blanket together doing that initial 5 by 5 square. After sewing all those 5 by 5 squares, there was a lot of them actually. Like I had a good few stacks of them. Oh my gosh. There's bugs outside, who knew? The 5 by 5 squares probably took me the most time to like sew together. After I sewed all the 5 by 5 squares together, I'd sew 4 of them together to make a 10 by 10 square. I was really surprised that it didn't take me too long to make one of those squares. I mean, like, I just had to like sew down and then sew across, but like it took me like no time to do. It was crazy. I felt like I had superpowers at that point. I was a sewing master. Once I did all those 10 by 10 squares, I sewed 5 of them together in a row. And I did that for all 5 rows, which also didn't take me too long to do, surprisingly. And then I took all those rows and I sewed them together to make the blanket. Truly, like by the end of the project, sewing them together was pretty fun, mostly because it was really fast to do and I felt like a superhero doing it. But it was really fun to do and to see like all of them come together. Like by the end, when I was sewing those like 10 by 10 squares, I just made a rule like I'm not allowed to put this thing together until like the very end, because I don't want to spoil it how it looks for myself. Because like even though I was so curious and I had no idea how it would turn out, I was like, I'm going to keep it a surprise for myself, because I mean, I was thankful for it because it was a really big surprise. Like I got so excited for it. I put it together. I like laid all the pieces out when I only had like the rows to sew together. And my face when I saw it I was so shocked. It turned out so good, like unexpected. Oh my gosh. The blanket was all done, finished. No more having to do with it. When I came out and showed my family, they really liked it as well. Especially my little doggy here. She was like coming up to it and sniffing it and like she sat on it. She was like, this is mine now. Isn't that right? So yeah, that's how I made the pixel art blanket. I did really love how it turned out, but I just think it's so cool that it's pixel art, but as a blanket, like you can hold it, wrap yourself in it, like mind blowing, you know? The machine's gonna beep soon. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope I've inspired you to do something crafty today, because honestly, it's really fun. You should try it. Thank you again for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to. You don't have to. I hope to see you in my next video where I do another whatever craft I so please to do. I hope to see you in my next video. In the meantime, I'm gonna do some exercises. Bye.